Hello, hello! I am Ben Pick, and thank you for joining me in Running to Write, where I give questionable writing advice through running metaphors. In honor of Halloween, tonight's going to be a little more goofy than usual as I go through 13 villains who were right all along. There will be a lot of spoilers ahead, though I do keep things generic enough that it's not too much of an issue. And the most recent spoiler that I go through is from the past 5 years, and that has to do with Killmonger from the Black Panther movie. Also, mild spoilers ahead for the MCU's Infinity War, though if you're on this channel, you've probably already seen it. The villains I'll be describing had the power to make positive change, and had their plans succeeded, most of their worlds would have been better off. These are based on my own opinions, obviously, as villains such as Thanos think that they're in the right, but were woefully misguided. For Thanos' case, genociding half the universe doesn't make sense. It raises so many more questions, like, what if the half who died off were the ones harvesting and managing resources, so entire planets now die because no one can get the essentials? My point is, killing half the universe would likely cause the other half to collapse. Thanos had the power to create new resources or redistribute them differently, but then we wouldn't have had endgames, so As for running, even the worst workouts tend to have a net positive benefit. Whether it's strengthening my heart, burning calories, or getting endorphins to flow, I can say with almost absolute certainty that I am better off having gone for the run. As miserable as I am waking up early during the summer to get out well before the sunrise, I'm always glad that I did after the fact. Likewise, here are 13 villains you can root for despite how they've been portrayed from the hero's point of view. Starting off with the Three Bears from Goldilocks and the Three Bears. Goldilocks broke into somebody's house, ate their food, and slept in their beds. Maybe it was a little overkill to eat her in an act of revenge, depending on the version you're reading, but then again, maybe it was justified. Number 2, the Lord Ruler from the Mistborn series. With the power of a god, he reshaped the planet. Sure, there was some disparity among the people he ruled over, but they were still alive and mostly living in peace. As he was holding off global devastation, the heroes nearly ended all life by removing him. Number 3, the so-called Wicked Witch of the West. From a certain standpoint, the villain of The Wizard of Oz was right. The hero Dorothy dropped the house on the witch's sister, unprovoked I might add, and the lands of Oz were being placated by a charlatan known as the Wizard of Oz. All the Witch of the West wanted was her sister's belongings, which rightfully belonged to her, and not her sister's murderer. Number 4, Jaime Lannister from the Game of Thrones series. Jaime is the embodiment of the phrase, the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. Granted, pushing a child out of a window to preserve the secrecy of his incestuous relationship is villainous and unforgivable in every possible way. Yet years before that moment, Jaime Lannister murdered a tyrannical king to prevent him from blowing up King's Landing and killing everyone in the capital city. Although Jaime killed the man he devoted his life to protect, he saved thousands of innocent lives at the cost of his livelihood and honor, forever branding himself with the derogatory moniker Kingslayer. Number 5, the Infected from I Am Legend. The novel and movie differ greatly, where the novel is upfront with its theme that humans are the real monsters. The seemingly villainous creatures known as the Infected were sentient and formed a new society after the fall of humanity. Unable to understand them, the supposed hero sought to kill and eradicate them, thus becoming the monster he was trying to destroy, all while the Infected were attempting to start over. Number 6, Hook from Peter Pan. You know what I consider villainous? Breaking into people's homes, stealing children, and bringing them to a dangerous, unsupervised island. Captain Hook was mostly acting against Peter Pan and not necessarily the Lost Boys. Given that Peter Pan helped to get Hook's hand chewed off by a wild animal, and the previously mentioned kidnapping, Hook trying to stop Peter Pan seems like a righteous act. Arguably, children would be significantly safer in the early 1900s London without the likes of Peter Pan. Number 7, Agent Smith from The Matrix. Oops, the world ended. Due to war, Earth became an uninhabitable hellscape for living creatures. There was a tiny pocket deep underground for a few scared humans to huddle together while they ate slop and lived out their harsh lives. You know what seems much better than that? reliving the 1990s in a dreamlike state, back when the internet relied on dial-up. Sure, it isn't real, but the simulated reality knows the Matrix is much better than living through the final days of humanity. I mean, just imagine how much better it would be to live in a world where the second and third Matrix movies never existed. I hope the upcoming Matrix movie doesn't retcon things so that living in the Matrix is much worse, and this point becomes moot. Number 8. Principles from far too many sources. Maybe I'm getting too old for this, but in most cases, the villainous principal is merely trying to get the wayward students to behave. The principal in The Breakfast Club was ensuring misbehaving teenagers learned their lessons, some of which were pretty awful. In the movie Ferris Bueller's Day Off, Ferris hacked his school's computer and faked his girlfriend's family member's death, all so they could play hooky. During that day, Ferris helped destroy his best friend's father's prized car and snuck into a parade as the lead performer. Sure, singing a song is harmless, but think of all the security measures he circumvented even back in the 80s. Meanwhile, the villainous Principal Rooney spent the day trying to catch Ferris in the act so that he can be punished for the numerous felonies he committed. Number 9. Medusa from Greek mythology. Medusa is depicted as a villain, despite the fact that she started these myths as a beautiful woman who was victimized and assaulted by Poseidon in the Temple of Athena. Instead of enacting her revenge against Poseidon, Athena transforms Medusa and her two sisters who weren't involved into the Gorgons. Later on, the hero Perseus hunts down and intentionally kills Medusa, also that he can present her head as a prize for a king. Mind you, Perseus' side quest of hunting and murdering the Medusa was largely irrelevant to his own story, making her extermination that much more unjustified. All Medusa really wanted to do was live out her life in peace after being victimized by the gods. Number 10. Killmonger from Black Panther. Killmonger was fighting for equal rights for his people and for his home nation to abandon its isolationist policies and help out the world. Both of those would have resulted in making the MCU a better place to live, thus making Killmonger one of the MCU's most interesting villains, and one whose actions would have resulted in arguably a net positive. So much so that Black Panther, the hero of the story, enacted parts of Killmonger's plan after Killmonger was killed. Number 11. Guy de Bastira from the Midkemia Series. Within the early novels of this long-running series, Guy de Bastira is a direct antagonist acting against the heroes. However, most of Guy de Bastira's decisions were meant to keep the kingdom together. This is a vast oversimplification, but once Prince Arutha proved worthy to rule, Guy de Bastira stepped aside to let him do so. Many of Arutha's decisions before that point could be considered naive, if not outright selfish, such as rushing into the Dark Elves' realm so that he can save the woman he's betrothed to. Not only could that have resulted in all-out war and mass death across his kingdom, but had he have died, his nation would have been without one of its leaders, thus falling into complete disarray. Number 12. Benny from Rent. All Benny wanted across this play was to have his tenants act like adults and pay the money they owed for rent. When the heroes are incapable of paying, Benny goes so far as to offer to let them stay for free so long as they cancel their protest. For that action, he is vilified as a sellout, even though he's an adult merely trying to pay his bills. And lastly, number 13, Bowser from the Mario series. I'm going to bookend this list with sillier answers. Sure, Bowser kidnapping the princess is never justified, and the side plot of him trying to force her to marry him is always abhorrent. Except given the frequency of the princess's kidnappings, either the Mushroom Kingdom security is abysmal, or perhaps no kidnappings are occurring and the princess is a willing participant. Maybe she wants to visit a nearby kingdom with a vast biodiversity. I mean, how often can you visit a jungle paradise, an ice world, an active volcano, and a haunted mansion, all within an hour? Also, Bowser's actions prevent the Mushroom Kingdom's rulers from becoming negligent. And when the Mushroom Kingdom is under threat from an outside force, Bowser is always there, if reluctantly, to help Mario out of a jam. Not to mention that Mario massacres waves of Goombas, Troopas, and assorted civilians of the Koopa Kingdom in its effort to free the princess. all while those victims are living their best lives until Mario bumps into them. That's my list of 13 villains who were right, some of whom could have saved their worlds if those pesky heroes hadn't gotten in the way. As a bonus to this list of villains who were right, I'll include Julius Scava from the Nevernight Chronicles. Due to my shifting upload schedule, I have already recorded and edited my multi-episode review and critique of that series, so that's coming shortly. This is a minor preview, suffice to say that Julius Scava was right. I am Ben Pick, and thank you for joining me in Running to Write. Let me know in those comments if there is a novel, movie, or video game villain whose actions you support. Also, what are you dressing up as for Halloween? Do you agree with my opinions, or is everything I said wrong? I also post my running and writing progress on social media, so be sure to follow along and join in with your own thoughts. See you next time. Until then, rethink everything, and remember that a villain is the hero of their own story.